Welcome to the Musings of Music. I'm Mitchell Levinson. Thanks for coming on tonight. We will now be entering the Baroque era in our program, and I think it will be incredibly satisfying to introduce Antonio Vivaldi, one of the greatest composers in all of history. The Baroque era, so renowned for its dramatic expressions and picturesque style. In this era, we see that music begins to move from classical renaissance to classical, taking away from mostly religious practices with music to secular music. Now let's go. 1741, Vienna. I'm here with a sleeping Antonio Vivaldi on what is soon to be his deathbed. Now this is the guy who's written over 500 concertos, 50 operas, really an amazing composer, and we're going to speak to him in just a second. Vivaldi. Vivaldi.
Oh, God.
Can I speak to you? My name is Mitchell Levinson. I'm from the Musings of Music. Do you have anything to talk?
Well, of course. I'm about to die anyway.
I wanted to ask you a little bit, how did you become a composer?
For starters, I was born in Venice, Italy, 1678. At the time, knowledge of music was almost as important as religion. My father, Giovanni Battista, was a barber and part-time musician. I owe my upbringing and my love for music to him. He found me a violin teacher. He scheduled tours for me around Venice. I played for some of the finest patrons in all of Italy.
Now, I understand you became a priest. Can you tell us about that?
I began my studies for priesthood in 1693 and was ordained in 1703. I was known by my friends as the Red Priest because of my red beard. In my first year as a man of God, I was able to land a job in Ospedale della Pieta, a girls' orphanage. There, I taught music, theory, scores, and of course, I trained the girls in choir, viola, recorder, cello, you name it, I taught them. With my help, the Ospedale became the finest in Italy, and our presence was begged throughout our country.
Now, did you continue composing during the time at your Ospedale?
Of course. Being there for 13 years, I produced some of my best works, including Otogne in Villa, my first opera in 1713. I also had the Ospedale perform my greatest oratorio, Judith Triumphans. Devika Holofernes Barbek. It's an allegorical work honoring the victory of the Christian Venetians over the barbaric Turks in the August of 1716. I'll tell you something. This was a real high point for me. Not only was I sought after by every artistic director in Europe as a composer of the orchestral and concerto music, but also as a vocal music composer.
It's fascinating. What kind of jobs did you hold after that?
I really enjoyed freelancing. I got a job in Mantua in 1720 as a director of secular music for the city's governor, Prince Philip of Hesse-Darmstadt. There, I wrote operas, cantatas, and concert music. In this span of just a few years, I wrote the serenade La Cena Festeggiante, meaning the festival of seeing for the King Louis XV. Traveling for patrons in Rome, I played for the Pope on 2 different occasions. When I moved back in Venice in 1720, I continued composing operas in the Teatro Sant'Angelo Theater.
Now I must ask you about your 4 Seasons, a concerto that has been renowned throughout the whole world. It is easily one of the most famous pieces of our time. Now, what was your thought process when making this amazing set of concertos?
I really wanted to introduce something new to the music world. It was premiered in 1725 in Amsterdam. I didn't know it would become so popular. I was trying to show people music in a different light. Not only opera with the marriage of play and music, and not just religious mass. I wanted to show the little things in nature. I wanted it bold, yet descriptive. I wanted the audience to actually feel the seasons through the sweet melodies. I wanted it about nature, yet delving into human interaction, coinciding with the gentleness of nature. It was loved because it was different. I like the picturesque feel through music. It is why I did what I did.
He's dead! We have Gary Levinson coming onto the show tonight. Gary Levinson, Senior Associate Concertmaster of the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, as well as played multiple of Vivaldi's concertos, other pieces. He actually recently just recorded a CD with the Minnesota Sinfonia about Vivaldi's Four Seasons. So we're going to come on, talk to him about Vivaldi.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here with Mr. Gary Levinson. Thanks for coming onto the show tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So Mr. Levinson just recorded a Vivaldi CD with the Minnesota Sinfonia. So my first question for you tonight is, what makes Vivaldi such a great composer?
Vivaldi is a very interesting composer. First of all, he lived in the Baroque, and he lived at a time that was very exciting for music and for culture, in fact, because as we look back on history now, he was one of the very first composers who was also a great violinist and who cultivated, if you will, the understanding of what a virtuoso was going to become. So perhaps his most famous set of concertos, the Four Seasons, are all about a soloist playing virtuosic, very difficult things that lay very well on the violin.
And just for the audience, can you explain what a virtuoso is?
Well, virtuoso is a very interesting word. It comes from the word virtuous, which means great and, kind and positive. But the cool thing about virtuosos when it comes to music is it's somebody who has great control, mastery of their instrument, as well as great mastery of their music. So again, virtuosity is really something that we look back on history. When we look at somebody like Vivaldi in the 1700s, if you said to Vivaldi, well, how do you feel about your Four Seasons, the virtuoso concertos? He'd look at you like you're insane because it's something that he wouldn't understand. But now, in the 21st century, when we're looking back at history, we know that he was one of the very first virtuosi. So, back to your question. When you were saying, how is it that's exciting? What's so exciting about the music of Vivaldi? For me, the most exciting thing about the music of Vivaldi is how it sounds. It makes me feel like the instrument rings under my ears. Something about the way he constructs music, the way he heard it, it's incredibly infectious for the audience. It's infectious for the players. We all want to play it together. The harmonies are natural. There's something about nature, I think, which is part of the way that he put together the Four Seasons. There's a lot of bird calls in it. There's a barking dog. There's people snoring. There are people getting drunk. There's something very natural about these things where humanity is expressed in the music.
Bach and Vivaldi, two of the most famous composers today in the world. Of course, they overlapped each other in their lifetime from the 1700s. So back in their time, which composer was the more famous one?
Great question. I think that I'd have to say Vivaldi only because of circumstances. Vivaldi, as we alluded to before, he had the girls' school, he had the orchestra, his music was played all the time. It was very vocal. It was something that people were whistling on the street. It would be he was the popular music of his time. Bach, on the other hand, in his lifetime was kind of known as an old fuddy-duddy. He wrote fugues, he wrote counterpoint, and in the early 1700s they were into something called Rococo, which was lighter music, and they thought that, geez, he's writing all of this stuff that's architectural. We heard it all before, it's enough. And added to that, the problem was that he walked everywhere. He never left Germany. Bach, yeah, exactly. Bach never left Germany. Bach walked everywhere. Every employee he ever had was in Germany. And for example, when he wrote the Brandenburg concertos for the Count of Brandenburg, he was there on a job. And he was really not, in some ways, writing for anyone but himself or the things that he needed to do for his work as a working organist, as a working violinist, as a working orchestra conductor, as an arranger, as somebody who had to write every Sunday, he had to write an oratorio. So he was one of those people that really, he was so overworked, not to mention the 20 children, he was so overworked, his house was so full of stuff that it would be impossible, I think, for him to say, well, what's my legacy? Now, how is he connected to Vivaldi? He actually wrote the Italian concerto in the style of Vivaldi. And what's so exciting to me about that is he never met Vivaldi. To the best of my knowledge, he never met anybody who even knew Vivaldi. But by looking at a score and studying it, actually the score was brought to him by his brother, he was able to understand, assimilate the style of Vivaldi in his own language, with his own polyphonic style, and give us this masterpiece called the Italian concerto.
Thank you, Mr. Levinson. It's great to talk to you.
My
Back
pleasure.
to you.
So there you have it, folks. We have Vivaldi himself, a couple of critics, and this sock. Thanks for coming on tonight. We'll see you next time